introduce myself, I'm a principal consultant at Rapid Circle, a specialist in all things Teams, SharePoint, M365, anything productivity. And I'm a cat lady. I've got 2 cats at home and they're very cute.
Hi everyone, I am Olsen and I'm the principal consultant for the Adopt and Embrace team. I call myself a people person, and what I'm really passionate about is change management and employee experience. Opposite to Vanessa, I'm a dog lover, and I'm actually also a scuba dive master. And as you just heard in our introductions, we're quite different in a lot of ways, right? So, as Vanessa likes cats, I like dogs, but more importantly for today's topic is that I call myself a people person and Vanessa calls herself a technologist. So before we begin, we'd just like to understand who we have in the room with us today. So for all the technologists in the room, I'd like you to grab a green card and hold it up in the air. So all the technologists, please hold up a green card.
Come over to the dark side.
Cool. And then I'd like all my people to put up a blue. And as some of you have already done, if you feel like you're a bit of both, put both up. So our goal today is to not only convince you that everyone in this room should care about employee experience, but we also want to show you how bringing our skills and our mindsets and ideas together is actually the only way we're going to make things better for our people in our organizations. So that's the goal today. Because, again, this is one of my favorite quotes. I think we can all agree on that, whether or not you're people, person, or technologist, is that organizations as an entity doesn't make anything happen. It's the people who are in it that does. Every single individual in an organization has a role to play in doing whatever your organization does. And there's a real challenge in this space. So a lot of you would have probably heard more about this internally, but we're really struggling with employee engagement globally. So as the stat up here says, there's only 15% of employees that are actually engaged. 15%. It's really not a lot. And the consequences of having disengaged employees is really high. One of the things is just that it costs about 18–20% of their annual salary because they're not engaged. So they're not working effectively, they're not being a part of the organization, and in a second I'll show you the things you can achieve by actually increasing your engagement.
And from a technology perspective, what that translates to is increased risk, right? So a recent Forrester report cited 39% of employees either ignore or go around their company's security policies because it's the most effective way to get things done. Now, other reasons that they gave were those policies was too strict or unreasonable, I'm sure we've all heard that one, or I need to interact with my peers outside my organisation. Now, external sharing, it's totally a thing, it's been around for a while, but that doesn't mean that everybody is using it effectively or that the cyber team will let us. So that increased risk, really, we see that as translating to some of our governance practices and the way that we're locking things down from a governance perspective.
But on the flip side, so if we do actually invest in increasing our employee experience and increasing our engagement, there's a lot of wins that we can get. So, of course, the first one is we have happier people in organizations, they're more likely to stay. And not just a little bit more likely, actually 12 times more likely to stay in an organization. So for those of you who have a lot of churn, this is especially for you, but generally, we want to keep our talent in our organization. A lot of things can, if we have good people walking out the door, not only do we, that's a cost to us, but it's also all the knowledge that disappears as well. Profitability and innovation, of course, makes sense. If you're really engaged at work and you're really, happy where you are, you will be participating more in the innovation, which again is how we, in today's world, become a successful organization. And at the end of the day, employee experience equals customer experience. You've called up sometimes, that's the best kind of quick customer experience. Call up to an organization, you hear the other end, someone's not very happy, versus calling up to a place, someone who really loves what they do. The experience that you have is just so much better. And that goes across every layer of the organization. And companies like ours, we do what we do for our customers, and that's what we make our living doing. So just remember, employee experience equals customer experience.
And Kat, you just mentioned profitability. Well, there's also cost savings, right? We have an opportunity to mitigate risk and mitigate the cost of data breaches. We've got a figure here from IBM's cost of a data breach from this year, actually. Potentially, nearly $4.5 million is the annual cost of a data breach. And so we can save a lot of cash by mitigating those breaches. In fact, 74% of breaches based on that report, cited in that report, were actually caused by things like human error or privilege misuse. And so we have a real opportunity here through our practices and the way we're engaging with our employees to really save a lot of costs.
And the other thing is that normally sometimes when we talk about employee experience, we think, oh, that's an HR thing, right? It's only HR should care about that. And that's why we talk a little bit about that people and technologists, because in reality, it's not divided like that anymore. Everyone, most people work with some sort of technology in their day-to-day job, and the link between technology and employee experience is really proven. I like the one in the middle that says it's actually ranked as number 3 of what stresses people out the most. So when we think about having happy and engaged employees, technology is really important, and that's why it's so important that we work together. But what we often do when we think about using technology for employee experiences is we think, okay, we found this really cool technology. Let's go figure out what the process is or what the context is that we're going to use this new cool technology for. And not only then do we think, well, how do we then do some comms and some training for our people so they can know how to use this new technology? What we're asking you of today is to flip that around and actually start by asking the people, well, first of all, figuring out who your people are. What are their roles? What do they do? And then asking them, what are their challenges? Because if there's not a challenge, again, we're talking about with engagement, there are going to be challenges they're facing. So let's figure out what those are. And as the previous speakers talked about, not everyone's the same. So really get to know your people. Then understand what is the context and the process that they're actually trying to solve this problem in. And only then find out what technology to use. Because often, you'll be wanting to use a lot of different technology together to actually solve the problem, but you won't know that until you know what the problem is. So we're going to show you a couple examples of how we do this, but first, I want to kind of flip around a little bit of how you can do this. So at Rapid Circle, we like to think about employee experience by using the employee lifecycle. And of course, a lot of organizations do this. I really like this one because it's very simple. It's a Gallup employee lifecycle. And so the way we work with customers when we talk about employee experience is that we say, okay, before we go into anything, tell me about your challenges. So we have stakeholders from across the business, IT, HR, comms, ops, whoever, and we get them to answer what are their challenges across the life cycle. And you get some really interesting results out of that. You actually see a lot of commonalities across. One of the big ones, for example, is there's too many communication channels, or we don't really understand what onboarding experience needs to be improved, or whatever it is, but it's a really interesting way to start. And then we start thinking about, okay, well, how can we actually help improve some of these things? Is it a upskilling? Is it a digital leadership? Or is it really, again, working on that onboarding experience? What is it we're trying to do? And then how can we use the range of different technologies and tools that we have available to then help solve that problem we identified at the beginning? And just a little pause for the people in the room who don't know about Viva. So there's a lot of Viva icons on the right over there. So for those who don't know, it's Microsoft Employee Experience Platform. Currently has 8 modules in it, with more coming. So yeah, very much worth looking into for the people who are interested in employee experience. And we are going to show a couple of examples of some of these modules today as well. So these are the 3 examples that we're going to go through. They are based on customer experiences. We're not going to name the customers, but it was kind of the learnings that we've had through working with specific customers also, but just generally with the customers we work with. So the first one we're going to talk about is understanding and taking action to improve employee well-being. Then we're going to talk a little bit about the collaboration between frontline and office workers. How do we improve that? What can we do with the technology we have available? And then Vanessa will talk about how governance, which we don't often say in relation to employee experience, even though it has been said a few times today, which is awesome, about how it's really the key to improving modern ways of working. So that's what we're going to go through in the next little bit. So the first one is, so what happens is most organizations now do send out some sort of engagement survey, or at least most do. And you get this, we send out the survey, maybe once a year, maybe every second year, whatever it is, and you get this result back in this big report. And then every single organization I've worked with said, what do we do about this now? How do we do something about this? How do we actually use this information to improve the employee experience? So that's a challenge that we identify in a lot of organizations. And then on the right here, so that's a survey result. So that says that people are they're feeling emotionally exhausted. See there are quite a lot of yellow up there and some red up there. And then when we actually saw that that data, we thought, well, maybe it's because people are in too many meetings. Maybe that's the reason. That's what we need to focus on. But then when we use Viva Insights, which actually goes in and finds collaboration data, you can actually see, well, people are, only in 5.5 or 7.2 hours of meetings a week. Is that a lot? Is that not a lot? We don't know until we have the context, but maybe it was lower than the people we work with expected for this one. And what's interesting about when we compare it is that we can suddenly see the perception data, which is the survey data, versus the collaboration or behavioral data. You can also call it feelings and facts, but by putting the two together, you get a better understanding of what's going on. And what we found out here is that IT and HR are two big categories to figure out what's actually going on, because the people who hypothesized this were the people who are in a lot of meetings, and it is something that's really hard for them. So what we found out, we actually have to dive deeper into it. We have to go down to the team level, maybe even the role level, to find out what's going on. So again, this is when you hypothesize what comes out of the survey results, we can sometimes get it wrong, and this just gives us another data source to help us do that. Couple examples, so really good for this organization. They generally have quite good flexibility, and it actually also shows in the after-hour collaboration. It's only about 1.5 hours out after-hour collaboration. Some organizations, they might say they have really bad flexibility or their work-life balance is really bad. You can actually then, using Viva Insights, go in and find out, well, how many hours, and then you can actually break down what are they using those hours for. Again, just getting more information about what it is that's going on. And the last one I want to show you is about manager coaching time. So this is all about how much time people have one-on-one with their manager. And if you first look at the survey results, there's quite a lot of people who are kind of neutral around their professional development. We could hypothesize about what that is. But if we look at it next to the Viva Insights data, you can see for IT, there's 37% who get no one-on-one time with their manager. Could that be a part of it? It's another question, but it gives you more information to then go and find out what's actually going on, and to then actually make a plan about it. Because once you really understand the problem, which is this is what's helping you figure out what the actual problem is, you can then use tools such as Viva Goals to actually then figure out what you're going to do using the OKR methodology, which is objectives, key results, and then initiatives and projects. And you can then set that up in the tool, and you can actually track it, you can manage it, and you can use that to really see what progress you've made from, let's say every year, the survey you did this year, until the survey comes out next year. You can actually have actionable things you're doing and tracking how that's coming along. So that's one example of how you can kind of think, starting with the problem, using the tool, figuring out, using different tools together as well to solve the problem we find. The next one I want to talk to you about is about the collaboration between frontline and office workers. So we often think that if we give them the tool like Teams, everyone's on the same platform, they'll figure it out, right? They'll figure out how to work together, they'll figure out how to communicate, it'll be fine. But in reality, there's a lot of things that break this down. So first of all, not everyone knows how to use the tools. We might not have set up our collaboration spaces very purposeful. So, there's too much going on, don't know where to go. There's also old habits die hard, right? So a lot of organizations I work with frontline, they're used to just picking up the phone, ringing whoever they know, and then they get that knowledge. But that knowledge isn't then shared with everyone else. So a lot of things that kind of break down that collaboration. So what we did recently with a customer is we actually said, okay, well, let's start with using what we call our 10 Ps framework. And those of you who've worked with Rapid Circle before, this is one of our favorite in the Adopt and Embrace team. Written 2 books on it, if anyone wants to know more. And basically what we do, as you can see here, we start with the problem. So what is the problem we're trying to solve? And then what is the purpose of the collaboration space that we're going to be creating together? We then talk about the people, who's going to be a part of this. Is it, again, that's when we start talking about, okay, there's going to be some frontline, okay, well then it has to be very mobile friendly. How do people work? What do we need? Do we have any externals? Things like that. And then priorities is all about what are the channel structures going to look like? What are the things that we actually want to achieve using this team site? And that is where it gets really purposeful for how it's designed. And it's co-designed so that everyone understands what you need to do in it. And the last one I'll really touch on is the principles. So you can set all this up, but unless you set behavioral guidelines for how people are supposed to use it, and that's down to when do we tag people? How do we get each other's attention? Do we share documents? All these different things. So set some guidelines around behaviors. And then of course, plugins, there's a lot of cool things you can put in there. The last part of the 10 Ps is really an IT and governance perspective as well, but we have it as part of there. So that's the first thing that we do. We create a really purposeful team site that's co-designed with the people who are going to be using it. We then use different things from Viva, for example, to say, okay, well, how can we plug in different technology to solve some of the challenges they have? So one of the challenges they had is that when they onboard new people, it's really hard to find the information because they're out in the field and getting the right link and things like that was really difficult. So what we did is that we actually added a tab in the team site with Viva Learning, which you can already do now if you have M365, and we added up their content from SharePoint. So it's right there for people to use, very easy. And for the different channels, we had different content because there was different things that we wanted to do. We then created 3 really key topic pages for them, and this is built on Viva Topics, which is a knowledge management system, and we could talk about that for hours, but basically we created 3 pages, and on that are the key people who are experts in this area, there's then the key documents they need, the key videos they need, and how to find out more. And then we took those topic pages and we created them into connections cards. So I don't know how many of you have played around with Viva Connections yet, but you can basically create these cards that are really good for frontline because they're the first thing that come up when you open your Teams app. So we created these topics in the cards, so when they took out their phone, the frontline workers, the first thing they saw in Teams was that card, and we found out what it is they really need to know. So that we built kind of, again, purposeful around what it is they were trying to solve, what are their challenges. And then we built that into an integrated solution. Again, that was really focused on the mobile friendliness of it. So people out in the field can grab it out, they can take a picture of whatever's going on, they can find the right person, they can share the knowledge, they can do all these different things. So those were my 2 examples.
Okay, so we've just talked about the employee experience side of things, but one part that is super important so that we make sure that people understand where they're supposed to be using these tools and that they provide the right context. I feel that governance is, as a technologist, the way to empower those modern ways of working. You know, we're seeing a massive influx of content. I'm doing audits every other day of, you know, M365 environments that have thousands upon thousands of teams, billions of millions of documents. In fact, one statistic from Microsoft was 1.6 billion documents are added a day within M365, and I'm definitely seeing evidence of that. 130 billion terabytes of unstructured content is going to be created in M365 by 2025. Now, what does that look like in reality? Well, these are some of the buzzwords that I see when I'm out talking to customers. Big one in green, sprawl. We've all heard that word sprawl. Oh, we're going to have thousands of teams every month, you know, and nobody's going to be able to find everything. What's that going to translate to? Well, I don't know what to use when. You know, we've got these great tools that enable a good employee experience, but we need to make sure we have the right context and the right people involved to make sure that they get the most out of them. If we've got all of this content floating around, then we also see a lot of when to use what, and a lack of life cycle. Essentially, a lot of content I see stays in M365 and your file shares, and maybe Google Drives, maybe another document management system forevermore. And there's lack of context there, right? So there's definitely that lack of insight in being able to manage that content. Well, where does this end up? You essentially end up in the digital version of a cluttered desk. I don't know about you guys, but I definitely don't keep my physical desk like this, but sometimes it does feel like this virtually. You know, Ian mentioned in the keynote that people are really overwhelmed with the amount of content and information that they have to manage, and that's getting in the way of how they do their work. So we need to make sure that we make things easy for them. Now, how do we do that? Well, we've already started by talking about a people-first approach. So making sure we get the right people involved, talking about their pain points, like you mentioned, Kat, and translating that into the tools that you're going to leverage. You know, the key workloads are generally SharePoint, Teams, Viva Engage, but there's also all of the other Vivas that are floating around, like Viva Connections for your intranet, and Viva Topics and everything like that. But then also choosing your governance tools that are going to reflect the outcomes of your frameworks, like the 10 Ps process. And what that gives you as an end result is some kind of an interface. Now, this is a screenshot of Orchestra where you're able to select a workspace based on a given template. Now, that might actually be unique to where in the business you are, whether you're within HR or if you're out in the field, if you're in manufacturing. The types of templates and collaboration workspaces that you're going to choose is going to look different based on what you do and who you are. And that's taking the people first approach, underpinned by all of your governance building blocks. So, you know, a lot of organisations have to comply with certain legislation, or they have organisational policies that you need to comply with as well. I'm in Victoria, I'm a Melbourneian now, so the VPDSF and PROV is probably the buzzwords that I hear thrown around a lot. But you've also got your data and IT and risk policies within your organisation that you need to comply with. What that does is inform how some of those governance processes play out. So while we take a people-first approach around how people want to collaborate with each other, we also inform, you know, what is our processes around how people should be collaborating as well. We also want to take an ownership model. I'm a big fan of the shared ownership model, where, you know, I think a lot of times I talk to customers and it's all entirely driven out of IT. You know, if you want to get a new workspace, you have to get approval from IT. Actually, hands up, who actually has that process in place in their organisation today? Yeah, we've got a few. So I think what we're seeing now is more of that empowerment model, where we might take, yes, we need approvals, we still need checks and balances, but we might actually take a more nuanced approach and empower the subject matter experts within your organisation to make the right decisions. And they would be the ones who own that. We need to think about life cycle as a building block, you know, both from creation of a workspace, creation of content, you know, making sure that people are able to quickly and easily get their content, and, you know, they have nice Teams templates and they can easily create their documents in the right place. But then we also have sunset processes that allow us to spin down our workspaces and also spin down our content. And that would go back again to any records management policies that you have in place, making sure that you've got your retention policies, your records management system integrated with this entire platform. Security and compliance, again, is a big area at the moment. It's probably, you know, I think we heard it's the #1 concern of CIOs at the moment. So we use our governance tools like Orchestra to reflect what those policies should be. You know, making sure we have good guest management in place to mitigate that risk. Risk is my favourite word at the moment. We have good external sharing policies in place, and it's nuanced, right? Not every workspace in Teams and SharePoint and Viva Engage is going to need super lockdown policies because the content isn't sensitive. So we would reflect all of our configurations appropriately. One area which is really interesting to me at the moment is operations. You know, M365 is a greenfields platform. It's constantly evolving, and so we need to have the right operational model in place that allows us to pivot and again take that people-first approach and have the right engagement with the organisation. That might equate to making sure people, you know, teams are resourced appropriately, or there's a team structure in place to manage that. And that's also informed by insights. For example, you know, you've got your productivity score in M365, you've got usage stats, you've got third-party products like Swoop and even Orchestra providing you with heaps of insights around how people are using these tools. And what we can do is leverage that to then feed back again to the people and say, hey, we can see that you're building your digital literacy in how you collaborate with each other. You're maybe sharing in a way that's, you know, awesome. Maybe we want to build upon that and introduce some new tools like some of the Vivas to help you improve your employee experience. So where does Orchestra fit within this? part of what I see is, a lot of extremes going on. For example, we don't want complete ad hoc chaos, free-for-all, people are using Teams or Viva Engage or SharePoint without any guardrails. But we also don't want things super tightly controlled, or maybe only in certain scenarios we want certain things to be super tightly controlled. So really what we want to achieve is that Goldilocks of governance, where people are empowered to make the right decisions, that they're able to have a good experience when they're collaborating, but we also have the right guardrails in place. We have the right templates, we have the right endorsed tools, and the right security measures in place to make sure that we're also mitigating our organisational risk.